Okay, we're going to move on to Chapter 3 and Chapters 4. Both Chapters 3 and Chapters 4 are both material that you should have seen before when talking about client assessments in your practice classes. So none of this material may be new. There may be some new terminology, but hopefully none of it will be new. Okay, so let's talk about first Chapter 3. We can talk about client problems or goals, and if you think about it, you flip around a client's problem, you can get a goal, such as, a client may come in and say, I feel depressed. Their goal would then be to feel less depressed. And then you put that into measurable objectives, targets, and a target comes from a problem, and a goal comes from an objective. And those are at the measurable level. So if we want to operationalize depression, we may use a standardized scale such as a GCS scale, and I know that the GCS runs from 0 to 100, with higher scores being displaying a higher level of depression. So, and 30 being the clinical cutoff, the level at which somebody is considered clinically depressed. So our target is the score on the GCS, and our objective would be that our client reach 20 or below on the GCS, for example. And again, we'll go over these terminologies again, but this is just an introduction. And then from those measurable objectives, we should be able to tie those into your intervention. In terms of what a problem is, it's pretty simple. It's why a client comes to see you, what's disturbing the client. In terms of preliminary steps in identifying clients, we'll talk about these. First off, you want to survey the client's concerns and basically start where the client is. That's just good social work practice. You don't want to assume anything. You don't want to have all the answers. You really want to take your cues from the client. The second thing you want to do, with that attitude, you want to make a comprehensive list of problems. Many agencies have problems checklists that may be helpful. Suggest that you make use of these when you're trying to come up with this comprehensive list. And then afterwards, it's helpful to review that problem list with the client to make sure you're on the same page and working with the same set of problems, and to make sure that you've heard them and they understand what you're going to be working on. Going on, the next step is selecting targets. Within each problem area, if the problem area is complex, such as depression, you may have to determine priorities. For example, within depression, are the main problems, are they having problems with their sleep, attitude, mood? Within DSM, sometimes, usually you break it down into different dimensions of a problem. So determining priorities within each problem area is important. And then finally, specifying the problem from vague to specific to make the target measurable. And we'll talk about this at length in about 2 slides when we talk about clarity, accountability, verifiable source, increasing and decreasing behavior, and measurability. While we're selecting the targets, we in social work want to work within a strengths perspective, focus on client strengths, and try to express problems in positive terms. Uh, for example, instead of decreasing truancy, we may want to say increase client attendance in school. And so when possible, attendance is a obviously a strength. So identifying client strengths to increase rather than problems to decrease. And this is just sort of an overall strategy, and that may increase clients' motivation and participation in treatment if you can focus on their strengths and help them work on their strengths. They're maybe more motivated to work with you in that way rather than a problems perspective. The third step, prioritizing problems. This should be a negotiation between clinician and client that considers a number of things, such as client preference. If a client is interested in working on a problem, they're going to be more motivated. Also, if you select problems that have the greatest likelihood of being changed first, then when you succeed in changing that behavior, success breeds success. Also, you want to choose problems that are relatively concrete and specific, because the more specific and concrete you can get in defining a behavior, then it's easier to measure, and if it's easier to measure, then you can have a better chance of monitoring change. So if, for example, if a husband complains that his wife nags him as soon as he gets home from work, that's a pretty, nags him about yard work when he gets home from work at 5 o'clock. That's a relatively concrete and specific behavior that you can work on and break down and understand where that comes from and how you can change it. Also, you have to be aware of the resource restraints within your agency, and if your client has some problems, maybe your client has some A&D issues, but your agency doesn't have resources to work with those problems, so then it's wise to refer those problems out to another agency. Also, it's important to pick problems that, if they go unresolved, are most likely to produce negative consequences. And these are crisis situations. So obviously, if somebody comes in suicidal, you want to work on those suicidal thoughts because of the high negative consequences. So picking those crisis situations, obviously you're going to work on those first. Also, you want to look for gateway problems, and those are problems that will open the way to working on other problems. For example, a client may have anger issues, and anger, may have problems with rage. And if you can work on those issues, that may open up to some other problems such as depression that's underneath the rage. So some problems cover up other problems, so you want to identify those. And finally, you want to, similar to the greatest likelihood of being changed, you want also to look for problems that result in tangible change, change that clients can see. And if you measure things and can show the client that things are changing, and then they can relate that to their seeing their own behavior change and feeling better about themselves, then that will motivate the client to keep working on things. Some keys in operationalizing problems into targets, making them measurable, going from the vague to the specific. We want to look at making things very clear. We can do that in 3 ways. We can have the client provide concrete examples to us. My example of, when I get home, my wife, starts bugging me about doing yard work as soon as I get home. That's a concrete example. When and where the problem occurs. Some problems are situational, so you want to understand where the problem happens. Is this a problem that works, is a problem at home, at work, at school? Does it happen just during the week or during the weekend? So you want to understand the situation it occurs. And then using the ABC model, if you're not familiar with that, the B stands for behavior, and then the A stands for antecedents, things that happen before the behavior occurs, and then the C stands for consequences, things that happen after the behavior. So you contextualize the behavior between what happens before and what happens after the problems, and that's a way of gaining clarity. You also want your problem to be countable, and that's a way to make it measurable. Perhaps you're working with a child. How long are their temper tantrums, and how often? If they vary in length, you'd also want to know how often they occur and how long they occur. You also want to specify whether you want to increase or decrease a certain behavior. That's also important. We're going to talk about verifying source, and what that is where you get your data. Most practice evaluation data is self-reported from the client, but we're also going to talk about getting data from other sources, such as relevant others, the practitioner, or other colleagues of practitioners. And then finally, ways from going to the vague to specifics. It's important to pick out a method that you're going to measure whatever behavior is troublesome, and we'll talk about those methods in chapters 5 through 8. Concurrently, we're going to talk about goals and objectives, and just going over the first slide I went over. Instead of talking about problems and targets, we can talk about goals and objectives. Goals are simply preferences that the client has about the future, and they break down in 2 types: ultimate goals and objectives. Ultimate goals is what the client or relevant others would like to do or be at the completion of intervention. What do they want to look like or feel like when the intervention is over? These goals, ultimate goals, are often vague and abstract. Examples: to be less depressed, get along with my spouse, do better in school. whereas objectives, or what the book also terms intermediate goals, may be specific steps necessary to achieve an ultimate goal. An objective uses measurable targets, such as I talked about earlier. A measurable target for depression is a generalized contentment scale score, where a generalized contentment scale measures depression. So a measurable target is a score on that scale, and an objective is a target with a criteria added. So we could say, okay, we want to work with this client until their score reaches 20 or below, which is way under the clinical cutoff, which is 30. Or you could, if you're limited by time, then you could say that you're going to work. Let's go on to examples. Instead of saying to do better than school, an objective would be to obtain a B average, or to not miss more than 2 days of class, to receive no disciplinary reports this semester. So you can see that all these contain a target with a criteria added. For example, the first one, the target is the grade average, and the criteria is a B average. In your treatment plans, you might be asked to put together some goal or objective statements, and just want to go over what those would include. It would certainly include who, which is the source of the data, which is often the client. Will do what, stated in measurable terms. Maybe fill out a GCS, standardized scale. To what extent, and this is what specified criteria comes in, until, we're going to do this until their score reaches 20, or until we work with the client for 12 weeks. That may be part of the criteria as well, if you have a limited number of sessions. And then under what conditions and situations, where we're going to ask the client to fill out where in the clinician's office, when, every Monday afternoon at 4 p.m., and with whom, with the practitioner being present. And just want to direct you to Table 3.2 on pages 76 through 78. And these give some examples of how clients' goals are operationalized into problems and objectives, and then tied into interventions. So if what we've talked about so far seems abstract, this table should help you give examples to understand what we've been talking about. Final notes on Chapter 3. I just want to mention that we will not be covering the goal attainment system. That's not something we'll be talking about. And want to encourage you to read sections on setting goals in groups and problems and issues in setting goals. You know, what we've talked about, we haven't talked about a lot of times clients won't magically fill out scales or anything. So the book talks about how to motivate clients, how to um, deal with other impediments with your agency and things like that. So please read those sections. And that's chapter 3, so I'm going to stop and do a separate recording on chapter 4.